So today we're tackling a topic that I'll admit I was a little hesitant to even approach.
I bet.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about end times prophecies. And when I first started reading these excerpts, I gotta say I got a little freaked out.
Yeah.
All those images of fire and brimstone and the world ending, not exactly light reading, but that's why you're here. To walk us through what these prophecies actually mean. We got excerpts from both the Old and New Testaments, right?
Right.
And one of the things that really tripped me up was how some of these verses kind of make it sound like the world ended back when Jesus was around.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, did it? What's going on there? Help me out here.
Well, you've hit on one of the biggest misunderstandings about these prophecies. The Bible often uses really strong symbolic language
It does.
to get across these deep spiritual truths. So when we read these doom and gloom pronouncements in the Old Testament, like in Genesis 6, it says God's going to put an end to all people and wipe out both them and the earth.
Pretty intense.
Oh, yeah. And then there's Ezekiel 7, talks about the end being right there on their doorstep.
Yeah, those are some seriously scary verses.
They are. But you got to remember, for the people hearing those words back then, the end of their world as they knew it, their nation, their temple, their whole way of life was a very real threat.
Oh, I see.
So to them, yeah, that was apocalyptic.
Okay, so maybe not the literal planet Earth ending. But...
Exactly. More like the end of an era.
So like when the Roman Empire fell, that kind of thing.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. The Bible often uses the term end times to talk about these massive transitions and shakeups. And it's not just destruction, it's also about judgment and purification to make way for something new and better. Like you think about the Babylonian exile. For the Israelites, that was a total end times event.
Wow.
Full of suffering and loss. But in the end, it led them to recommit to their faith and return to their homeland. So it was an ending, but also a new beginning.
Right. I get that.
Yeah.
So how does that idea of end times as like a period of transition,
Yeah.
how does that fit in with Jesus and what we see in the New Testament? Because there's still a lot of talk about the last days and all that, versus like 1 Peter 1.20, Hebrews 9.26, 1 John 2.19. They all seem to point to something big going down.
Yeah, this is where we get into the whole fascinating world of study of last things. And with Jesus coming onto the scene, this whole end times idea, it takes on a deeper, more spiritual meaning. It becomes less about physical destruction and more about the shift from the old covenant to the new covenant.
So less about fire raining from the sky, more about like a change in how we relate to God.
Exactly. You see, before Jesus, the relationship between God and humanity was often seen as, master and servant. But Jesus comes along and shows us this completely different way of seeing God as a loving father. He offers forgiveness, grace, and a much closer personal connection. And this is what the new covenant is all about.
So Jesus coming, in a way, marked the end of the old way of relating to God and the beginning of something way more powerful.
Exactly. It's a huge shift. And this new covenant, it's not just some abstract theological idea. It changes everything about how we're supposed to live our lives.
I can see that.
If we're not servants anymore, but God's beloved children, well, that's a game changer.
Definitely. A lot to think about. Okay, so what about the second coming? A lot of people, they still connect that with the end of the world.
The second coming, yeah, that again, it's not necessarily about the world going up in flames.
Okay.
It's more about the peak of God's plan, the ultimate fulfillment of the new covenant, where God's presence is fully realized here on earth. It's like, if you can imagine, it's like a wedding. The joining together of Christ, the groom, and his bride, the church.
So instead of freaking out about the end times, we should be, looking forward to this ultimate connection with God.
Exactly. These end times, as they're described in the Bible, they're not just about judgment, they're also about unbelievable blessing and transformation. It's all about coming into the fullness of God's love and purpose.
I like that. A lot more hopeful way to look at it. So for everyone listening out there, what does this mean for how we live our lives right now? If end times are about spiritual change and not the world ending, how should that affect us, if at all?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's one we all need to wrestle with. I'd say dig into those biblical texts, see what they say to you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it comes down to this. How does seeing these end times as a period of both judgment and blessing, leading to a deeper relationship with God, how does that impact you today?
That's a powerful thought to leave everyone with. Thank you so much for walking us through all this. For everyone listening, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and see where your journey takes you. We'll see you next time.
See you, Bess.
Bye.